The concept for EPARTRADE is basically, in my opinion, there's a big hole in the internet. So the internet started many years ago, but there's never been an online business community for racers on the World Wide Web. The need for EPARTRADE is actually quite obvious. Basically, people in the business of auto racing need a place online to hang out and to get their problems solved.
It's extremely simple for a buyer or for a supplier to interact on the platform. The first thing you need to do is sign in, which is free. And the second thing is, when you see a product that you're interested in, all you need to do is click on request more information. If it's a company, you click on request more information, and then from there, it is forwarded directly to the buyer or to the supplier.
You can go to EPARTRADE.com, you become part of a community of businesses in racing, and it makes sourcing products much easier than just on the internet or using Google.
At EPARTRADE, there is no e-commerce. It's literally a connection just like at a trade show. So now, any time of the year, a buyer could reach out to a supplier through an email.
More than that, it's a place to go just to keep current every day. So it's a good place to start your workday in your racing business or in your offices of your professional race team. And you know you're current when it comes to new technology, industry news, technical papers, technical videos, all of that and more. We're not looking for a million hits per day. All we want is people who are really the volume buyers of racing products in the racing industry to be part of the little world of EPARTRADE. We have racing businesses participating from around the world. So you get suppliers from around the world, you get buyers from around the world.
EPARTRADE really eliminates having to travel, closing down your shop. Now you have a place to showcase globally your racing product and technology.
Good morning from California. I am Francisque Savignan, the founder and CEO of EPARTRADE. It is 9 o'clock. And welcome to Race Industry Now, the technical and business webinar series presented by ARP. With me this morning is Judy King, and the co-founder of EPARTRADE, and Jeff Hammond himself. So I see Jeff is on right now, but his camera is not on. So we're going to wait for Jeff to come in. So how are you doing, Judy, today?
Perfect. Thank you. You know, I'm so excited about having Impact Racing on today. I always think about Bill Simpson, and I became friends with Bill the last couple of years of his life, last few years, and he was always out there pushing our platform to everybody and saying he would work for us now. So I just am delighted to have Impact Racing on. It makes me think of him.
Absolutely. And I see Jeff. Good morning. Jeff, you are muted right now. So we're going to ask you to unmute. We are going to bring Ben O'Connor, who is our special guest today. And Ben has been with Impact Racing for many years. I'm fortunate I've known Ben for a long time.
Nice to meet you, sir. How you doing this morning, Francis?
I'm doing great.
I'll take it.
Thank you.
All right, great. I mean, I don't know what I missed, but I'm sure you can bring me up to speed on it. And again, I'm just excited about, like I say, having your company talk to us and talk to me, and particularly about the latest and greatest things that are going on in the world of Impact, as well as especially restraints and anything else you can share with us, because you know what the number one thing in racing is? Safety.
Safety, that's it.
Yep. So go right ahead and wow me for a minute here, okay?
Yeah, so we can start the presentation. We'll bounce back and forth in and out of the presentation. I've got some things here that I can show on camera as well. But basically, I'm going to give a rundown of a couple different topics. We're going to discuss some of the restraint technology, and I should say things that we've learned as manufacturers in restraint technology and how it affects or relates to biomechanics, right? The human body and how that affects what we do and the products that we use and how we develop them to enable to develop a better solution, a safer solution for the competitors. The other thing we're going to talk about is just some basic stuff. We're going to go over the different styles of latch mechanisms and the different adjusters that are commonplace in the market now, and some not so common that I'll share with you as well. Anyways, I'll start the presentation here, and can everybody see that? No, probably not. Let me see here. Share screen. There we go. So, more technical glitches here. All right, there we go. So basically, there are different latch types. There are two main primary latches that are used in competition motorsports. There are other styles used in the OEM applications, your common, clicker style that everybody's used to seeing in their passenger cars. But the two common latch mechanisms used in motorsport are what's called a latch and link, and then a cam lock. The latch and link, as it suggests, has a latching mechanism, which is this little lever right here that has a hook on it that hooks through a tab that goes through the mechanism there, right? And then that clips into place. Very simple, very reliable, right? System there. Easy to use in terms of egress, unlatching. Downsides are a little bit more difficult to latch everything together. You have to feed it through the different various loops and hook it. And sometimes you're in the vehicle, suited up, helmet on, that can be a little difficult because you can't really see it and move around. Maybe your mobility is a little limited. The other style is a cam lock. Cam lock is a lot like the factory OE mechanism in that it has several tangs instead of just one. These tangs right here, and they just clip into the mechanism. When the latch is in its latch position, you simply snap these in and you're good, you're done. To unlatch it, you twist the knob. In this case, it's got a lever. Push the lever to one side to the other. It instantly releases the webbing. And I'm actually going to, here we go, let's do this a little bit better. Disadvantage is a little bit more expensive than a latch mechanism because it is a little bit more complex.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I understood in that latch link deal was basically wasn't it developed by the military?
I can't speak with absolute certainty in that, but the original concept, but yes, that's, people believe that to be the case. This was originally originated in military use and defense use, and probably somebody at some time saw them in a fighter jet or whatever and said, hey, you know what, this could be really useful for what we're doing, right? And so I believe its origins do come from either the airplane industry or defense industry, one or the other. And yeah, that is that basic concept of the latching mechanism there for sure. So then there are different adjuster types, and we'll cover the different adjuster types that are, again, common in the marketplace. Again, your OEM vehicle has usually a ratcheting or a self-adjusting tensioner, pretensioner that just pulls it back automatically. But when you're a race car, you don't have those. You have to adjust them manually to get good and tight in the seat. And we're going to go over all that here in a little bit, and the importance of being tight and all that. But the different types are, we have your standard knurled adjuster. And let me see here what I'd like to do. I'm actually going to jump out of the sharing real quick, and I'm just going to show this to people so we can show you how these operate. All right. So can everybody see me? Can you see me all right?
Mm-hmm.
That down a little bit. Okay, so this is your standard type of adjuster, been around forever, and it's steel construction. It has a knurled bar that runs through the middle here, and the webbing goes around it. It comes up one side and then down through the other side. And the way that works is you simply pull on it, and you pull on it like heck, right, to tighten it up. And then to loosen it, you lift this here and then pull on the opposite side, and it allows the webbing to crawl back through, creep back through. Again, the advantage of this, very, very simple design, very foolproof, fail-proof, really, limited amount of components. The disadvantages would be one of weight and also ease of use. Like I said, it's a little bit more difficult to pull the webbing through, and you have to get your adjuster at just the right angle here in order to get that to release. If it's folded on itself, it's very difficult to loosen. So that would be the disadvantages of that. From there, we have what we call our QSR, quick safety release, and it is a wedge type setup. And what it is the webbing comes up through the backside here, and see if I can get that, see the loop here. And there's a wedge right in here. Everybody can see that. I know it's black on black on black. It's a little difficult here, but there's a wedge in there. It goes around the wedge, back down the other side, and then out the bottom. And the idea of that is that when you pull this tension on this, it actually drives that wedge down into, there's a loading surface right here. And the harder you pull on it, the harder it pulls that wedge in there, and the harder it locks onto the webbing, right? So it's a very good mechanism in terms of, you know, the harder the impact, that actually the tighter it grabs onto the webbing. The advantage is that it loosens quite easily by lifting up on the lever, and a little bit more difficult to do here when you're not actually having you don't have the restraints on you. But I'll see if I can get this to work here, but you can see it and it tightens very easily too. So very easy to use, good for quick driver changes. We typically use these on shoulders. We don't typically use them on the lap because they work a little too well. This lever right here, if it gets bumped into the seat or something like that, it maybe loosen the restraints while in operation. So for those, the laps, we typically stick with the standard type adjusters or another adjuster I'm going to show you here in just a second. The third type of adjuster, or actually before we get into that, I'm going to jump back to the latch and link really quick here. We also offer this with an integrated latch and link where the adjuster's built onto the actual latch mechanism itself. And that's just nice because it keeps it good and compact, it lightens it up, and it gives you more room to tighten the restraint. So from there, and I'm sorry about the noise, got the stuff on my desk here, stuff clanking around, but so from there we have what we call our, this is an integrated adjuster cam lock. So the adjuster is actually built onto the tang mechanism. So it's all right there. And again, you just clip that in place. Now, again, this one is very easy to use. It's got a knurled bar in here too, but when you lift this little mechanism here, it actually lets go really easily. So again, very easy to tighten, very easy to loosen. So really good for driver changes, endurance applications, whether that be road racing or off-road, something like that. But more importantly, easy to get tightened. And we're going to go over that again, the importance of being tight. And you're going to hear me talk a lot about that, but it's very crucial. So, and that just allows that easy, and it's good, small, it's compact, it's all right built into the tang. So it's lightweight. And again, it gets it close to the center mass, which just makes it easier to get tighter because you don't have the adjusters off into the sides of the seats, digging in there, or they're difficult to get to. So that's why we developed that particular mechanism. So from there, I'm going to jump back into the PowerPoint presentation here. No, current slide. All right. And so we're going to go over the different, let me see. So the next thing I want to talk about, and this is when we're going to start getting into the biomechanics of restraints and how it affects people and how it interacts in ways that we've found to create a safer solution for people. And we're not alone in this. When I say we, I mean the industry. 2-inch versus 3-inch webbing. Now, for many, many years, 3-inch was considered standard. It was mandatory by most sanctioning bodies. And the thinking is that that was a strength issue. The reason they did that, they wanted something good and strong. And the textiles of the day didn't offer the same strength that they do today. So the answer to that was just more of the same, right? Bigger is better. So more webbing, wider webbing to get the strength they needed to pass some of the stringent testing by the different officiating bodies like FIA and SFI and whatnot. Nowadays, the webbing has gotten a lot better, so that's not really an issue anymore. We can pass any standard that's currently out there with 2-inch webbing without any issues whatsoever. But there's a big advantage from the safety consideration in running a 2-inch restraint webbing versus 3-inch. And it really all has to do with, and particularly on the laps, people have been using 2-inch on the shoulders for some time now because of the different frontal head restraints on the market. Because they sit on the device better, and I'll get more into that a little bit sooner. But specifically right now, what I want to talk about is the lap. So the advantage of the 2-inch versus 3-inch is that it sits better in the hip pocket better, or the ilium as it's called, right? That big bone in your hips, right? And the reason that that's important is that we want to keep center mass, the center line of the restraint, as low as possible in that hip pocket. And there's several reasons for that. One, it enables you to get the restraints tighter, meaning that if you take a 3-inch restraint and try to, if you cup your hand and you lay your fingers in there, your 4 fingers in there, right? You're going to see that, you know, the middle fingers, you have to contort your hand to get your fingers to drop in the pocket of your palm. If you curve your hand like this, if you pull a finger out, the 3 fingers just drop in there automatically, much deeper in there, right? So you're already tighter to begin with, but it also less distortion on the webbing itself, right? And that's good because it eliminates or reduces the amount of elongation in the webbing, and you know, which is where the outer edges stretch more than the inner and all that. But at any rate, you can get the restraints tighter by having a narrower webbing. The other thing that it does, though, is it keeps the center line of the restraint lower in the hip pocket. That's important to prevent lower back injuries, to help reduce lower back injuries in frontal events. Because what happens is, because your legs are very heavy, when you're in a frontal event, your legs want to try to pull your body out from underneath you, which is the origination of where the term anti-sub came from in anti-subs, and part of the reasons of why they were developed to reduce that. And getting the webbing as low in that hip pocket as you can really helps reduce that rotation of your hip, right? Because your legs pull forward, it wants to rotate and pull you underneath the lap belt. Now, that's critical, not just for staying restrained in the seat. That's the obvious thought. But more importantly, it's to prevent that the hip from rotating, the pelvic from rotating, causing lower back injuries as a result. The other thing, though, too, is very important, is you want to keep the webbing on the lap low. You don't ever want it coming over the top of the hip bone, the iliac crest, as it were, because that can create internal injuries, right? It gets in the abdomen, in a severe event, and you're smashing, right, your abdomen, you can create some pretty severe internal injuries that way. So your bones, your hip bones being the strongest part of your body, make the most sense in terms of stabilizing or containing that energy, right? So that's why we want the laps to be low as you can get them, tight as you can get them, again, to prevent that rotation and to keep you planted in the seat. And 2-inch restraints just do that much better than 3-inch. So.
Well, I understand it right now, you know, that NASCAR is making, you know, and requiring that. And you know, you touched on it. It's not like the first time that we've had 2-inch in NASCAR. They had 2-inch shoulder harnesses many years ago, and then switched to 3, thinking it was better. But they weren't looking at it scientifically like you are at the moment. I remember a discussion that I had with Bill Simpson. I know, just sitting here, it reminded me of the conversation. He pointed out to me, you can reach down and find the point of your hip bone. And if you can get that lap belt to sit down more on top of your legs and pull into that point of the hip bone, you prevent that anti-sub, and also prevent it from riding up and creating that internal injury. So all of this, again, it's been discussed, but now I think, like I say, with science and a lot of the technologies out there today, and I love the way you've got it drawn up, especially where the lap belt is. You can see clearly where the point of that hip bone is, and where if it's pulling down properly, it acts almost like an anchor. And the good thing about it, people say, well, when you pull it too tight, you can't breathe. No, it gets it below your lungs. You can still breathe. You know, that doesn't restrain that, but it does keep you from, going down and sliding down in the event of a frontal accident. And again, it's going to be a lot better on your back in the long run, keeping your back firmly against the seat that you're riding in instead of trying to hurt you.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, no, absolutely. So, yeah, anything we can do to keep the belt below that iliac crest there, right, and help prevent that rotational motion there. But also the other thing though too, and this gets also, and then we'll talk about anti-subs as well. But the reason for being tight too is because we want to eliminate how much the hip area, or that lower portion of the body moves forward in a frontal event as well. Because what happens is Newton's law, object in motion, stay in motion. So you want to, the further you're stayed back and prevent from moving, the less the impact is when the webbing takes up its slack, right? And it does, it stretches, it moves. So by keeping the bottom, your lower portion of your body tight up against the seat the best as you can, it eliminates that energy. And that energy actually transfers up through the upper body in an event. It almost has like a cascading type of an effect. And I can't get into the science behind that. Some much smarter people than I can discuss that. I don't know if you've ever heard of ICMS, the Industry Council of Motorsports. It's a very, very good organization dedicated to safety in motorsports. And they've discussed this quite a bit at some of their seminars and things like that. Some very, very intelligent people, both with NASCAR and IndyCar and other organizations that are part of that council that discuss these types of things. But anyways, I wanted to throw that out there real quick. Anybody interested in motorsport safety, it's a great organization to be involved with. But yeah, so that's the other reason for staying tight on the bottom. Also in a rollover incident as well, you want it tight there to hold you, keep you contained in the seat as well. There's kind of a misconception that that's what the shoulders do. And they do to a point when it gets to a severe motion that the spine starts stretching, that the shoulders would come into play to help you, to keep you down in the seat in a rollover accident if you're to land on the roof. But you want the majority of that work to be done by the lower portion of the body, again, because it's the strongest part of your body. Go to different shoulder types, or a variety of different shoulder types used in the industry. And it really depends on the type of racing, type of vehicle that you're doing. Some personal preference, but it's usually dictated more by the vehicle than the individual preference. Individual shoulders are the most common, the ones on the far left there, where you've got two separate straps that would come up from the buckle around the neck and then join back behind the seat. There's the U type, which really, as it indicates, it really just goes back around the bar and then back over to the other side. That's very common in dragsters or vehicles that have, like pro stock style cages or dragster type cages. Pro stocks don't typically run that, but where you've got a very limited, narrow space to attach everything. V-type, same type of scenario where you've got one latch that would bolt onto a tab behind the seat. Transitions, really popular, like when they went to the 3-inch, but then they had to address the needs of the FHRs. They went from a 3-inch down to 2-inch to allow that really to abide by the rules really of where, you still had to have 3-inch, but you wanted to accommodate FHRs. A lot of sanctioning bodies allowed the competitors to use this, what they call transition. One of the things that we had done early on is a ways to meet the rule requirement for the 3-inch, but still fit the FHRs very well. As we did a fold over and sew, where we literally took the 3-inch webbing, folded it over and sewed it on itself to narrow it where it went through the FHR. Technically still a 3-inch restraint. So those are kind of the most popular deals. There are other ones for use in FHRs where there's one where they have a 3-inch webbing underneath the device and then 2-inch webbing above the device. And that goes more towards being able to pinch the device and keeping in place in a frontal motion. The devices actually stay with the restraints. A lot of people don't know that. As you move forward, you slide underneath the restraints, and it kind of helps that. That's certainly open to debate. I don't know that that's really that necessary, but people certainly find comfort in that, and I wouldn't behoove anybody for doing it. Anti-subs, probably one of the areas that the most questions come from, because there's a lot of mystery revolving around anti-subs, because there's so many different types, and it's really, and they actually perform a variety of different things beyond just their basic capacity or their most common logical thing, anti-submarining. They really accomplish that in not a way that people typically think of. It's really not, they're not intended to make contact with them to really keep you from anti-subbing. There's a little bit of that in severe cases for sure, but primarily what it really is, to, again, to keep those laps in place in a frontal event, right? Keep the lap low. Again, it's all about keeping the laps tight and low on the hip bone. And the increase of the different straps comes from a couple of different requirements. One, prevent groin injury. When you have a single point, that can be a consideration in a severe frontal event that could come back into the groin area and cause injury there. To compromise for that, you mount them differently. When you run a 5-point single strap, you actually mount it flush with the center line of your chest, stomach, body. It actually goes a little bit forward of the seat when it goes down through the floor, not back behind. And again, that's to prevent those types of injuries. But then it's not as good in containing the lower body back in the seat. So that's really where the 6-point and 7-point and even the formula restraints really come into play. 7-point kind of bridges the gap between both. You've got the two straps. We'll talk about 6-point first here real quick. So the 6-point, what it does is come down, hugs the thighs a little bit before going back. It's spread out a little bit as it go back, about 20-degree angle. And again, that's to help prevent groin injuries, but also helps prevent that pelvic tilt again, like I said, by anchoring further back. The 7-point kind of bridges like a 5- and 6-point combined. You've got the center strap that still really is primarily designed to keep everything down and straight, and in severe cases preventing that anti-submarining. And then you've got the two outer straps, which again help keep the hip rotation minimal, and it actually helps spread the hip bones or the hips apart a little bit as you go forward, because when you move forward, you think about anything that's a webbing or a rope, if you tie it around you, the more you move forward, it wants to tighten around you. So it wants to compress the hips. And this kind of helps counter some of that motion. The next style, and this is pretty common in IndyCar Formula One, Top Fuel, is what's called a formula style. And it really, the 7-point on the end there is more popular than the 6-point formula. We don't do that many of those, but it actually takes the anti-subs right here and through a loop that's on the lap belt and then around the thighs and back to really help share that load on the thighs, and again keep that rotation and that compression that happens. And then of course the 7-point uses the anti-sub, standard anti-sub 5-point sub down straight with the leg wraps that go back. This is kind of state of the art, or I should say the most current technology used. It doesn't work in every situation. Depending on the latch mechanism, you can't do it sometimes because there's nowhere to put the loops if it's moving. If you're doing an integrated adjuster where it's built into the latch mechanism, it doesn't work in some other designs. So mounting is another area that probably the most critical of all of them really is proper mounting of the restraints, and probably one of the things that you see out in the field that's most commonly incorrect. A lot of injury can be prevented by just properly mounting the restraints. And a couple of things that we'll touch on, when we're looking at shoulders, there's a range. You really want this pretty much parallel with the top of the shoulder if you can get it. If not, you'll hear varying different degrees from manufacturers over the years. Bottom line is you want to minimize it. We really don't like to see that more than 5 degrees up or down, so 10-degree total. It's been common thought for many years that there's 10 degrees up or down or 20-degree range. Like I said, I think the bottom line is you want to minimize that as much as possible. Now, certain FHR devices they really need a little bit of downward angle to help keep the device in place. Again, particularly ones that there's a particular device on the market that doesn't use a forward yoke, the rev. it actually needs a little bit of that downward to help keep that device in place, versus slightly upward. But slightly upward is okay. Again, the shoulders aren't to keep you down in the seat, they're to keep you from moving forward. So if they're too far down, what happens is that U effect I talked about the rope, as your body moves forward, it wants to tighten, it wants to compress the spine, right? And curve the spine in a way that's, you know, where your stomach's going outward ahead of your shoulders and hips, which is not a good scenario. So again, it's to eliminate back injuries as well. Laps should be close to a 45-degree angle from your upper body positioning. And again, the reason for that is, again, it's a I don't want to say a compromise, but there's two different forces that come into play with lap belts. It is, of course, the frontal motion that we're all familiar with, and the first thing that comes in mind. But again, getting back to like a rollover event, something like that, where the body's trying to leave the seat, then you also need to hold the body down into the seat. So if the angle's wrong, if it's too vertical in a frontal event, the body continues to move forward, right? Because if you're like this and the motion's this way, it's going to easily pull it. If it's more 45, right, it's harder to pull it, right? Same thing in a rollover accident. If it's too horizontal, it's going to allow the body to lift because it's going to pull up on the straight. It gives you some range there. So the 45 is considered the best angle for that. And you want them really as close to the body as possible too. Really no more than 18 inches really from the front hip edge there. You want to keep it pretty close to again, to minimize stretch. Anti-subs, depending on the type of anti-sub, again, the single, as you can see in the diagram here, like I talked about before, is pretty much in a straight angle with the, you know, neck, chest, and stomach, comes down on the floor there. And again, that's as you move forward, so that doesn't come in and prevent groin injuries. Whereas your outer 6 point straps are going to come more downward and then out, and sometimes usually you'll fasten the same locations as the lap, although they don't have to be, as long as it's in a floor location, keeping that 20-degree angle.
Now, all of that right there that you've just pointed out, I think is one of the most important parts of promoting that safety I spoke about early on in our discussion, is that if all of this is, if this is ignored, then no matter what kind of strap you've got on it, you're going to create physical harm to your driver.
Right.
It's not mounted properly. So
yeah,
I'm glad to see that.
Yeah, no,
that
for
this
sure.
is something that's part of the presentation.
Yeah, and I don't have detailed images here, but I'll talk about this briefly. I just forgot, just remember this. You know, the hardware used and how that they're fastened in the vehicle is also important as well. Particularly the laps. If you notice this, like this would be a plate here. There would be a bolt in the center here that would go through the tab. So that's the angle that you want that tab. You don't want it lying flat on the floor, right? You want it, you know, even with your hips like this. And that is really so that, and if you can, preferably you want to use a sleeve, a step sleeve, so that you can float the tabs, which is mandatory again in NASCAR, so that in any motion, it's not pulling on one side of the webbing versus another, right? Which is, many would say, contributed to Dale Earnhardt's accident and the seriousness of it, in that it sheared through the restraints. And I'm not going to comment whether the truthfulness of that or whatever, but that is a topic that people talk about, is a possibility. So you do want, because the webbing will load the slot where it goes through evenly if it can float. If it can't float, it's going to load one side versus another. So that's important as well. Shoulders, same thing. If you're going to run a tab, you want the tab aiming forward, just like the same angle as the webbing, right? If you're doing a wrap around, it simply wraps around the bar. So less of a consideration there. Interestingly, in the diagram here, I just noticed this would be, and I said that would be incorrect. That would actually be, you wouldn't see it in the diagram if it was correct. That would be running side to side in the vehicle, not front to back there. So. we talked about the adjusters and the cam locks. I went over that already about the new integrated adjusters, so I won't bore everybody with that again. Talk a little bit about SFI dating in the reasons that, from my understanding, why the dating exists and where that came from is really, it's based on a worst case scenario. And I don't know when this was done, but at some point, and this really probably goes back again to the textiles of the day and whatever, but there's a very real scenario which happens if you were to leave any textile in sunlight, UV exposed to UV, it degrades its strength. It dries it out and it starts losing its strength. And it's a pretty abrupt knee point where it gets to a certain amount of UV light. And the determination was made at roughly 2 to 2.5 years or somewhere in that area, right? Was the worst case scenario. So that's where the kind of the timing came from. So everybody understands that that's not dictated by the manufacturers. A lot of people think that it's a conspiracy to sell more restraints. It's not a conspiracy. So conspiracy to sell more restraints. We don't set that cycle. It's not us. That's SFI that set those guidelines in FIA. The reality is a lot of cars that may sit in a garage area absent UV lights, you know, the restraints would probably be okay for a longer length of time, but in the competition world, you want to err on the side of caution and just replace the restraints every couple of years, as the dating indicates. Now, what SFI did a few years ago, they went from a born on date, which is the bottom one here, to an expiration date, and they really did that just to make it easier on sanctioning bodies and tech officials to really know. They didn't have to guess and do the math or whatever as to, you know, because some sanctioning bodies may have allowed 2, 2.5, maybe 3, right? So there's trying a guessing game, and this really eliminates that because it's clearly indicated on the tag now as to when that expires. So, and if a sanctioning body wants to extend that further than that, so they have that prerogative. But it's an easier guideline to follow. It's easier to follow in the field, and it's, you know, easier from a manufacturing standpoint because you're not stamping and warehousing and things like that too.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, we're just past the bottom of the hour, and we're starting to get a couple of people asking some questions here, Ben. And I just want to remind anybody out there that's watching this webinar to please, if you got questions like Eric Brown has for us currently, he wants to know, are there any restraint considerations needed for a larger driver, 6 foot tall, 200 pounds plus versus a skinny kid? Is there anything there that I guess needs to be addressed?
Not really, because the biomechanics are all the same, right? Or body shapes and types and bone structure is all pretty much the same. It is more difficult to get tighter if you have more mass, for sure. But the biggest consideration I would say in that scenario, and this is a very real scenario in any form of motorsports, but most particularly in any type of endurance racing, is during the course of the event, you lose water retention, right? You lose water, you lose mass, the restraints get looser. You also settle into the seat, and your body just moves around. We're just big bags of liquid, right? So as you sit, the restraints, you know, even though they're tight when you start, push things around and they can become loose. So for someone with more mass, that's more likely to happen. So you want adjusters that are easy to use, I would say, is probably the number one thing. But the angles, the positioning, all of that still applies.
Well, another thing that I've learned from what you just explained, if you're a crew chief or an engineer out there, you need to remind your drivers, your spotters, whatever. Tell those drivers every now and then, about halfway through a race, you know, check your belts, put your belt tight one more time, because you are going to be loosening up. And I know a lot of drivers are good about making sure they stay secure, but every now and then, in the heat of the battle, they have a tendency to get more interested in the moment than thinking about, hey, this belts are loosening up. If I hit the wall late in the race, it's going to hurt.
Yeah, right. And there's a big difference between a 10-minute heat race and a 30-minute main, or an endurance race and road racing or off-road, or you run the Baja 1000 or something in the vehicle for several hours at a time, even more so, right? It's even more critical to remember to do that. So, no, that's good. Any other questions?
I mean, I guess, you know, the thing is, you've addressed so many of them. I think the biggest thing is what's around the corner. I mean, I think that, you know, what we're headed in and what we've been working toward for for safety, you've addressed so many of those points, because originally, we didn't bring in the factor of the human body. We were just saying, okay, let's just get them in a seat. And we realized the seats weren't worth a dang, so we built better seats. And then we did, I'm saying, it's been a climbing the ladder for a long time now. The last 25 years, it's just a general progression. You bring in the fact of a helmet here. I mean, it's going to be one of the next things. I think the other thing is the testing. We have one of our attendees here was wanting to know about, explain the difference between FIA versus SFI testing. Is that just the main differences? They're just two organizations that do different types of testing.
Yeah, that's exactly it. They're just two different organizations. They share some standards. Some standards are different between the two, but the concept is the same. Where you're loading the restraints a certain amount to make sure there are no failures, make sure there isn't slippage through the adjusters, making sure that that the webbing is strong enough, the hardware is strong enough, and things like that. So relatively the same type of a deal. I would never say that one's better over the other in terms of that. There are certainly some room for argument to that, I think, by some people, but I myself wouldn't look at one as saying, oh, I'm not going to run this versus that in terms of safety. I think they both do a good job of defining what's needed and making sure that the manufacturers meet those specifications, those standards. So,
some people might find it also interesting that we mentioned NASCAR, we mentioned IndyCar. How many different associations, and do they ever have like a seminar where all FIA, SFI, NASCAR, do you guys ever come together and talk about it, especially like with your company? Or you guys ever get into those things that discuss it globally, or is it more individually? Like Impact will go to NASCAR and talk to them, or IndyCar?
Yeah, I get that organization I mentioned earlier, ICMS, is really, that was its intention, was to bring the various manufacturers, right, and organizations together and have those types of conversations. So that's the one I know of that's probably the most prominent. And it's dedicated purely for that purpose.
Right. Trevor Ashland just sent in a little bit of information here. We may find kind of like clear up the FIA, SFI testing deal. He says here SFI testing is done statically. FIA testing is finished off by dynamic testing. So two different procedures. Yeah. Appreciate that, Trevor. Yeah, thanks. And also, you see here, you want to go ahead and address that, what Tom has just put up there? Because I know I saw you kind of mentioned these
that
guys early on.
Right, that was a link for everybody right to the ICMS website. So again, I encourage everybody to check that out. Great amount of resources there.
If you today, with your involvement with Impact and those of us out there, hopefully, we've got, track promoters maybe listening or whatever. Is there any area of safety that you feel like is, because I know that your product is what it is, but are there areas of safety that a lot of these short tracks and people like that they're missing the boat, and what can you offer up to maybe help them? I mean, like your, for example, the mounting information that you provided today, can they call and talk to Impact? And can Impact, advise somebody, hey, I'm building a race car and I want to know how to mount my seat, know how to mount my belts and stuff. Right. And can you help me, as far as the safety side of it, do you guys have that available?
Yeah, I think that there's two things, on that note. One is having knowledgeable tech officials at the track. And I understand a lot of times they're volunteers, but they may not have the best knowledge base. You can certainly contact us anytime. We're always more than willing to help in that regard, as I know the other manufacturers are as well. We're not alone in that. I've even attended races with tech officials and done some like training or to that aspect, or just help tech officials, the racers, and educate them as well, right, as to proper mounting and things like that. So yeah, no, we're certainly always willing and more than able to do that.
Again, I'm gonna throw something out there. And again, thank you, David Green, who is one of the guys that works with NASCAR in their safety division. He's a former driver and former champion. Does a great job of keeping up with what's going on in their 3 divisions. But what I would love to think about, we're, coming toward the end of the year, we're going to have industry week once again. Maybe we could get together and do a live one of these again, but maybe do it in such a place where we could have it set up where we could show, these angles and these things, just like your drawings, but use maybe live people to go through some of this stuff a little more, and when I say this, make sure that all the racetracks around the country, around the world, can maybe get an opportunity to watch us go through this again and maybe better explain it and work through it.
Yeah, it'd be a great video topic, I think, for sure. Yeah,
you're reading the same one I'm reading. I hear, oh yeah, everybody's getting wound up now. Right? I love it. David says #1 issue is constantly not have the customers follow manufacturer's directions. And David, that's kind of like where I'm coming from, is I was wondering if we could go through this. Ben's did a great job, but you know how it is if we had maybe a cutaway roll cage and a seat there and going through, having a live guinea pig in there and working through some of this stuff, if it would be more informative to them. So Jeff Thorne asked about the replacing the harnesses. And I know that there's a lot of series that don't follow like NASCAR or any car about, okay, you got to get rid of them. Right. Best thing I can tell you, if you're running dirt tracks and if you're running short tracks and you're washing and cleaning your cars and not taking care of keeping those things from getting wet, being out in the great outdoors like NASCAR and IndyCar would be doing, you need to change them pretty regular. If they get any kind of fray, and even after hard impacts, don't be afraid to pull them out and put new ones in it. I mean, that's right. One of the cheapest things you can do, because to save someone's life or physical injury, because, well, we thought this and we thought that. Don't think it's just real quick. You have a hard impact, toss them.
That's right. Yeah, you stress those fibers and hardware. Some of the sanctioning bodies out there, it can infuriate a racer. At times, they'll literally cut them out of the car, and that's probably a somewhat of a combative measure, but it is. It ends that problem, because you will have people that, well, they look fine to me, and they'll continue to use them when they may be compromised. So you don't really know, unless you have instrumentation on your body in the car, right? You don't know how many G-forces the restraints are seeing in these events, and what could seem like a fairly mild event, as we all know, can be fatal, even though it doesn't look that bad. So absolutely, it's a very good point. You want to replace the harnesses anytime you're in an event that's any kind of serious nature, short of just rubbing the guy next to him, spinning out, right? Yeah, that definitely you want to, certainly anything where you have to extract the driver, or the car's on its, on its side or on its lid or something like that.
You might want to read this last one from Tom Weisenbach about what he has offered up here, and you may be familiar with it because, again, you work with these folks regularly. Mm-hmm. That is, the IMCS will host the racetrack safety program in December. It's a one-day seminar on track safety, and we have had discussions and demos on a lot of the topics that you guys are touching on here today, or we've been talking about here today. And I think that's wonderful, and that's one of the things that are lacking in between David Green and Tom. I think they're hitting it right in the heart. If you want to protect your driver, if you want to think about the number one thing in racing is not racing, it's safety, because you want to be able to go to that racetrack, have fun, and come back and be able to talk about it with your buddies and your girlfriend and your family. You want everybody to walk away happy. And the only way you're going to do that is not cutting corners. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this into play. We haven't touched on it. The rest of your equipment, your helmet, your restraints, your head and neck restraint, your fire suit, your underwear, everything, your gloves. Do not cut corners, because when you start cutting corners, that's when they're going to jump up and they're going to bite you. And a lot of times you don't get a second chance. So I'll make sure that we drive that home. I've been around racing, pretty much all my life. And I've watched and seen a lot of stuff come from tragedy. And you touched on Dale Earnhardt. One of the biggest tragedies we've had in NASCAR has led to a lot of what we're seeing here today. The caring that's being put in to what your company is addressing here today, it's huge. That's the reason why we see these big, wild impacts and people walk away. They don't even have to be carried away on a stretcher. They walk away. I think, most recently, the Ryan Newman crash in Daytona had us all holding our breath. Oh my dear God, we're getting ready to go back down this road again that we don't want to go down. And fortunately, we've now had, again, improvement. And I think that we just can't overemphasize how important safety is. And again, I'm seeing stuff here from David Green. David, I really appreciate you tuning in here today and seeing what we're talking about, because I know how much you care. You've been there, you've done that. And this is what we're trying to do, is we are wanting to, just do everything we can to help prevent these guys from getting hurt. I mean, this is what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And I thank him as well. It's great to have people like that involved in these processes like this. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Touching real quick on it's going into really dirty. Yeah.
How do you
Really
clean them?
mild. It's a good question. And this is a really common issue in off-road as well. And what happens is the dirt and mud and stuff gets caught between the fibers and embedded in the fibers, and it makes it very difficult to adjust as it goes. One, look at the manufacturers and what type of webbing they're using, how soft and pliable it is. It's something that you can't typically see in the website or whatever, but that makes a difference. We try to use a very soft and supple, but yet but it won't stretch. Webbing and tight weaves kind of prevent that. But to answer the question, mild detergent, soapy water. I was going to say,
I was told one time that ivory is really good.
Ivory or woolite. Woolite is always good for that stuff, right?
Right.
And just wash them in your sink and let them dry, right? So
I've actually had people ask me one time,
put them in
and
the dryer.
I do not know how to answer this, is dry cleaning. Pull them out and get them dry cleaned. Is that?
I don't, they use chemicals in the dry clean, right? And some of
I
these
know,
chemicals
and that's
may
why I say
not
I don't know the
agree with-
answer.
Yeah, I would not recommend that. I would stick with something like a woolite or something like that, really mild. In air dry, do not put them in the dryer.
Hang them out on clothes hanger or whatever.
The car wash, you guys will just spray them off with the car wash, and that's probably fine, right? So you guys want to make sure they dry pretty quick. You want to sit and rot, and that's another consideration too. So
no, and what let's get to that point. Let's just say you are a dirt racer. Let's just say that we're going through this kind of stuff. I mean, what would you say the lifetime on a belt would be if it's been raced? Let's just say you race in 25, 30 races a year on dirt, or even if you're a local short track racer. Should they follow the recommendations that FIA and SFI set out? Is that the best thing to do when in doubt, or what do you think the limit is?
No, I think those are very good guidelines to follow, because the problem is, like you said, while it's based on a worst case scenario, we don't know personally from our own experience, what's that worst, have we met that worst case scenario, right? If your car sits in an open trailer, it's just on 24 hours, every 7 days a week, then you're probably gonna hit it pretty quick, if it's a garage, maybe not so, but you just don't know. The heat, UV rays, even sitting at the track, sun beating on it, whatever.
Right.
You can lose that strength. So I think it's definitely wise to, even if you're not required to change those out every couple of years, 2.5 years, I think is the maximum allowable now. Which is,
well, Tom, like I say, Tom Weisbach is kind of like confirming that. He says, you guys go and race. First thing you do, you go to a car wash, rinse your car off and everything. And, the equipment sits outside the next day and it's drying. I mean, what you're doing, you're breaking down the integrity of the material you're using, and you keep on addressing it. We went to 3-inch because we felt like that was a better way. We're adding material, so you're going to be able to keep somebody from stretching them as much. Now we're talking about reducing it because we got better quality material, but still, if you don't take care of it, treat it properly, what are you doing? You might as well just not even be wearing one. I mean, I'm exaggerating. Don't get me wrong. I'm getting exaggerated, but all of these things we're touching on is for the betterment of the individual that's sitting within the restraint that they're wearing. If it's not functioning properly, then you're going to hurt somebody sooner or later. So stop cutting corners. Like I said before, the number one thing in racing is safety. So think about it like that. Well, it's really been good. We got about 2 minutes left here. Ben, would you have anything else you want to share with us?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think the only thing I would say is, when you're talking about restive equipment, one thing I always like to mention is you want to be as comfortable as possible in the equipment you're wearing. And the reason for that is you don't want to be a distraction from your driving. You want to stay focused on your driving, and the best way to prevent injuries, to prevent an event from ever happening. And the best way to do that is to be focused on your driving. So I think I'll leave it at that.
No, you bring up another good valid point. Make sure you're comfortable in your seat. Make sure your helmet fits like it's properly. It needs to do. Your restraints are doing their job. And at the same time, to me, what I have had experience from racing is when I'm sitting there more worried about what's in front of me, and I'm being held in the seat properly. My helmet is comfortable. I can see like I need to see. I can go racing and not be fighting basically something sticking me, you might say, or poking on me or distracting me because I'm not comfortable in my environment. You should be as comfortable in your environment as you are in your home and your recliner.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No distractions.
Again, thank you very much for being with us today. Appreciate the folks at ARP for helping to sponsor our webinars. And Francis, I think that maybe we've gotten some people's attention today. What do you think?
I think we did. I think you did a beautiful job, Ben, and thank you very much. Jeff, you were terrific as always, and we're so glad to have you hosting our webinars. And the webinar has been recorded, so it will be posted later on the EPARTRADE platform as well as on our YouTube channel. We also pushed Ben's product, Impact's product, back on the homepage of EPARTRADE. So if you have any follow-up questions, go on EPARTRADE.com, connect, engage, and you'll be able to touch base with Ben and thousands of suppliers from around the world. We built this platform for you, for the racing industry, to be able to connect and engage all year round and globally. So thank you for watching us today. We will be back next week at 9 o'clock for a double feature next week. We're going to be hosting the people from MacGlock and Fluid Logic, and we're going to be talking hydratation for drivers. And then we're going to be joined by our good friends at racer.com for a special on historic racing at the Monterey event. So thank you very much. Ben, great having you. And then hope to see you soon at the track. Thank you, Jeff. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
See you next. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Registering on EPARTRADE is easy. Fill out your name, email, phone number, and create a secure password. Next, select your business type. Choose supplier if you're looking to display products or services and connect with buyers. Choose racing business if you're looking to find new parts and connect with suppliers. Choose race team if you own or are a member of a professional racing team. Begin typing your company name. We most likely already have your company in our database, which you can select from the drop-down. Then, enter your job title. Choose Claim Company if you'll be editing your company profile. Other members of your company can choose Join Company if they'd like to use EPARTRADE as well. You can view and agree to our terms of use here. If you'd like to receive our weekly newsletter, choose Accept. Click Register Now, and your registration will be submitted for approval. You'll need to confirm your email once it goes through. To keep our platform industry only, you'll be approved shortly after. If we require additional proof of business, we'll reach out. Welcome to EPARTRADE.